Okay, we're going to start the meeting. My name's Mike Bland. Good morning. We are quorate this morning, so we can continue. There is no fire alarm planned for this morning, so should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit through the doors at the back or the glass door on my left. For guidance on making your own recordings, please see the notices in the agenda for this meeting. I can confirm that this meeting is being minuted, audio recorded, and audio live streamed via the Council's website. Members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. So I'm going to, Lauren Wheeler's taking the notes for the meeting, and we'll start with apologies for absence. Lauren, are there any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Mellish, Councillor Castle and Councillor Liz Harvey.
Thank you. Lauren, are there any substitutes for these councillors?
There are no substitutes, Chair.
I'm going to ask Lauren if there's any declarations of interest received in advance.
We've received none in advance, Chair.
Are there? I can see Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair. For item 6, just let you know I'm a Kent County Councillor and I also sit on the Kent and Medway Fire and Rescue Authority. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other further declarations? No? In that case, we will proceed to item 4, which is minutes of the meeting held on, 2 meetings held on 10th of July 2023 and also the 20th of May 2024. I'm going to ask the committee to agree the minutes of the meetings, which are in your papers, held on the above dates as a true record, and we can do that by general assent. Can we agree those minutes by general assent? Okay, we have general assent from those people that were there, so thank you for that. Okay. Item 5, in terms of public participation, I can advise that there are no public speakers for the meeting who will be heard directly before any relevant item. So we move on then fairly swiftly to annual reports from responsible authorities 2023-2024. Organisations on the agenda have been approached for annual reports, and we're here to receive written or verbal updates from the following organisations if received. And we'll start with the local authority report, which is a written report, which is on page 11 of your papers. And I'm going to ask the licensing officer, Anton Walden, to introduce the report.
Good morning, Chair. This is a report that's on behalf of the licensing authority, both the administration and enforcement side. The report is self-explanatory. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Walden? Councillor Brady?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. You probably know about this, Chair. I've mentioned this on quite a few occasions. Can we have a discussion on if there's a more efficient way of looking at pavement licences? I'm sure when it comes to the renewal date, your team are inundated with all the paperwork. And is there a way to possibly have it as a rolling licence, and if those establishments want to then come out of that, then that's when they contact KCC to come out of that agreement, and that might be more of an efficient way, because I see all the emails that come in at a certain time, and there seems to be quite a lot of them, and that must mean there's a lot of paperwork for your officers. And if we did change it to that more efficient way, then that will free up some more time. I'm just wondering if there's any appetite for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer that one if that's okay. My name's Bryony Williamson. I'm a newly appointed licensing officer working at the council. So I've done quite a bit of pavement licensing when I was previously at Folkestone and Hythe District Council. And as you'll be aware, the pavement licenses were sitting with Kent County Council. The legislation has changed. It changed to start with in 2020 with the Business and Planning Act 2020. Where they temporarily gave pavement licensing to local authorities. They've now made that permanent this year. So the vast majority of pavement licenses are now being processed by the local authority rather than KCC, although a couple do still exist. So they've made a few what I would call improvements to the system. It was very basic when it was first published. And there was no ability to renew a licence. You had to make a new application every year, and they ran from September. So that has now changed. We can now issue up to a 2-year licence, which means that there's slightly less bureaucracy, and there is a renewal process in place, and they can be at the time of application, they run for 2 years. So they don't have to be from September, which means that they're going to be staggered as people apply throughout the year now. So it's going to be less onerous on the local authority in that respect. So they will be staggered throughout the year. They can be for up to 2 years, and there is an increased maximum amount that we can charge for them, so it makes it slightly more cost effective for us to do those. So there are some improvements in the legislation that have helped with the process. That helps.
Are you happy with the response?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think so. There's an issue with the legislation to be able to keep it, have a licence indefinitely, and if they would like to then cancel that licence, they come back, and that would be a much more efficient way. I'm sure you would agree. So this is something that we need to take up, not through us, but if the legislation needs changes to make it more efficient, maybe some letter or some sort of ask or request with other local authorities to see if we can strengthen that voice, to see if we can make it a bit more efficient. Thank you.
Starting with a request for our MP to take an interest in this matter. Okay. Let me just say one thing, and it's very remiss of me not to introduce Bryony Williamson. This is her first meeting as one of our new licensing officers. Belated welcome to the meeting, Bryony. Okay, no other questions for the local authority report? Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the Kent Police report. PC Rolf has submitted a written report, but I believe, PC Rolf, you're going to read it out, are you? Okay, all right. Oh,
Sorry, you need to use it for the
Yeah.
streaming. Yeah. Other side. No, that button up.
okay.
Thank you. Normally my voice is loud enough, but didn't realise it was for recording purposes. Good morning, everybody. You've obviously had a chance, I hope, to read the report, and it's really just to ask if you have any questions from what was detailed in that.
Are there any questions for PC Robert? Councillor Howes.
Yeah. Thank you and good morning. I note with interest that you're part of a team which is looking into Herne Bay, and it talks about what you've done, but could you just give us a bit more detail about that? Because coming from Herne Bay, I know there's a lot of issues with underage drinking, and I know there's a lot of shops which are often visited because of their propensity to sell to underage children.
Yep, certainly. Obviously, some things I can't discuss because obviously it's intelligence-based, intelligence-led. But there is a community alcohol partnerships over in Herne Bay, which covers the Herne Bay area, which is all centred around partnership working with things such as trade-in standards, local schools, social care and things of that nature as well, where we do go out with the local authority as well and do regular visits and checks to make sure there's an understanding to these licensed premises around their roles and responsibilities around Challenge 25. Last year, I think I gave a similar update that obviously we'd reinvigorated it, and we have been going out quite regularly to do these checks. There are more planned, but I can't give you those dates and discussions for those because some of them are intelligence-led. But it's certainly something that we are working on and will continue to work on as well.
Has it been successful over the last year?
It has. We have had a number of people that also have decided to come forward to us as well and give us information that we can then develop and work as a partnership to improve. And that will lead into some visits that we do have planned sort of over the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Councillor Brady?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask questions on something that isn't actually in the report? I noticed that a lot of crime is down in the area once I've spoken to Dan and PC Stoner. But what it has gone up is cyber. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that we're linking with communities and neighbourhood watch groups and residents associations and parishes to see if we can get in front of the rises in crime. It's really good that across many of the other areas, crime is down across the board in Canterbury, but those specifics and what's being done to challenge that increase. Thank you.
Sadly, I can't answer your question. I'm a licensing officer for Kent Police and I deal with licensing related matters, which is alcohol and that type of thing. So I can't give you an insight into that, sadly.
Yes.
Councillor Smith, thank you, PC Rolf. I noticed that you've got the Herne Bay programme. I'm a Whitstable councillor, and we do have occasional dispersal orders. But one of our big problems currently is aggressive shoplifting of alcohol and anything that they just go in and take it, and it's on the rise. Do you work with any of these stores about how they could maybe better secure, because they tend to be underage as well, better secure how their alcohol is sold? It's quite difficult. I mean, my local co-op has put tags on absolutely every bottle of alcohol recently. And I just wondered if there's anything that we can do working with people who have licenses to sell alcohol to protect their alcohol. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So whilst I deal predominantly with just licensing, I do work with our local community safety unit, which is our local police officers. So you have like a beat officer designated to different wards throughout Canterbury, Herne Bay, Whitstable. So I do work with those officers where they're the ones that are out on the beat, going to these types of calls when we've had shopliftings and things of that nature. We do educate premises, but there's only as much education as that we can give. It's often company policy to have alcohol stored at the front and things like that. So we are working with some of these sort of higher up levels within those organisations to, again, give that crime prevention advice around that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for that question. And can I welcome Councillor Mellish, who's joined the meeting at 10:15.
Apologies, Chair. I was collared by a resident with a problem coming out of the house, and then traffic on the roadworks on the Canterbury Road. So my sincere apologies to the meeting.
Apologies accepted, I gather. Okay, so we're going to move on. Any further questions for Councillor Rolfe? PC Rolfe, sorry, PC Rolfe. Okay, no further questions. In that case, we'll move on to the next authority on the agenda, which is planning. And I'm going to ask, is there anyone present to give an update from planning? As I think I can see nobody, I think we will probably just move on then. We move on to environmental health, and the same question applies. And I don't think there's an environmental health person here present. So we'll move on to Kent Fire and Rescue, and I'm going to welcome Karen Longley to give us a verbal update on Kent Fire and Rescue. Karen.
Good morning, Karen Longley, the Kent Fire and Rescue. I'm Building Safety Inspector. I work in the Canterbury office. We cover Canterbury, Ashford, Folkestone, Thanet, quite a big area at the moment. I'm new to this area. I did move, I moved from the Maidstone office, so apologies if I don't know the area particularly well. And what you're expecting for a report. So it's just a brief summary of how many cases that we've been consulted on. Over the last year, roughly, it's 88 cases we've consulted on in the Canterbury area. We haven't had any representations. There was one that we didn't give a final decision on, which was the Ivy, because we didn't have any, we didn't have enough details. Our normal procedure is to request plans for the building and a fire risk assessment, and we make an assessment on that. If we're happy that we believe it's safe in terms of fire, we'd send a letter through to say that that's the case. Any other concerns, we tend to follow up with a routine audit as part of our risk-based inspection programme. So I hope that's covered what you need. If you need anything else, please let me know.
Are there any questions for Karen Longley? Okay, in that case, I'd like to thank you very much for attending and giving us an update and report. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm now going to list other authorities: Health and Safety, Trading Standards, Child Protection Agency, Primary Care Trust, Home Office Immigration Service. If anybody is present that can give an update on any of those, that would be welcome. But I don't think anybody is present to do that. So in that case, I'm going to thank those... hold on, Councillor Brady.
Thank you. Before you, I'd also like to thank the authorities that are here. I'd like to register my disappointment again, like last time, for other authorities not turning up and not giving giving written updates. So I'm just wondering if you would, on behalf of this committee chair, write to those authorities with demonstrating our disappointment that there wasn't a written or a representative once again at this meeting. I think it's really important that we do come together and work together, and it's not just the importance of hearing and reading these updates, it's also post and pre-meeting for different representatives from different authorities just to touch base, say hello to each other, and it's those conversations that are really important within local authorities and within the area. So if you could do that on behalf of the committee, that'd be really welcome. Thank you.
Councillor Brady, I'm very happy to do that, and I will liaise with our licensing officers in terms of doing that, and we'll contact those that weren't here today to say if they can't attend, it would be very welcome if they could send us a written report in any case, and emphasising the seriousness with which we actually take the task of the licensing committee, which applies to all those other agencies. So I will do that. Thank you, Councillor Brady, for that. In the meantime, I'd like to simply thank Karen Longley and PC Rolfe for attending and giving us an update from their agencies, and it's very good to see you, and thank you very much for attending and giving us your updates and being willing to answer questions that arose. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for that, and we're going to move on to the next agenda item. This is actually a more open item, which is the question and answer session for councillors, and it's an opportunity for any councillor to ask questions related to licensing issues more generally, and then I would ask our licensing officers to respond to any questions or views. So are there any thoughts, questions or views? I'll give people a moment to think. I've seen Councillor House says Councillor Smith got her hand up first, so Councillor Smith and then Councillor House.
Yes, it's a question for our licensing officers. I noticed that there's the scrap metal licenses and for people to collect and have also sites for scrap metal. Do we have sites for waste, considering that we've had some illegal sites recently? And I wonder if you could just expand on that for me, please, just a bit, just to some explanation of how it all works. Thank you.
The Scrap Metal Act was introduced in 2013. It was introduced by the government at quite a pace because there was a lot of scrap metal theft. It has subsided since then. We can only issue a collector's licence, So those are the people who go around collecting, and it's usually pre-arranged, and then they can take it to a site which has to be licensed by us. And then there is a track of monies paid and the purchase price from the site. We do not deal with waste disposals or waste carriage. That is dealt with by KCC.
Councillor Howes.
Thank you. I know, Anton, you've done this for such a long time and you've done it so well over so many different people in charge of the committees. You've told us that last year there were 7 hearings, 7 licences granted. How's that compared? You've given us a lot of data about last year, but over your many years involved, how are you finding the new system in terms of this work with officers, work with councillors, and also the work with businesses to actually limit, in many respects, the number of licensing hearings which are taking place? Because it used to meet on an almost weekly basis, didn't it, this committee?
Yes. 12 years ago, the average number of hearings for the committee was between 100 and 150. So the committee was having to deal with 2 or 3 applications per week. Over my tenure, and we've now had Bryony as well, we've changed the ethos in that we try to front load matters. So there's a lot of work done by the police, the fire services, and our own licensing enforcement officers to stop applications having to come to hearing, because they are obviously very expensive for the taxpayer, and it's better for the residents and the businesses if we end up with some form of agreement and that everyone proceeds on what I always term is good neighbourliness. If you've got a good neighbour as a licensee and residents, we tend to not have many hearings. And the ones that do come to us are usually as a result of bad neighbourliness. So it's a very simple thing, the Licensing Act. We have fewer hearings because of that reason. We try and deal with a lot of issues. When we do get objections or we get applications, we try to offer advice to the applicants if they're looking for a 6 a.m. licence, that they're probably unlikely to get that. And if residents object, for example, and saying we just don't want it, we will explain the law and what our limitations are. Because under any form of licensing act, there is a presumption of grant. And so unless there's a good reason, and that is not promoting the licensing objectives, the licensing authority is almost bound to grant it whatever. So that's the reason it's proactive working.
Thank you. Can I just come back to something Councillor Brady said as well? I think that's why it's so important that the other statutory bodies actually come along to these meetings. Local government is all about partnership approach, and luckily we've got 2 really proactive partners here today, and we do miss out a lot from the other partners not being here, but I think they miss out a lot more by not forming those partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on to that as well, what Anton had just said. Predominantly, a lot of my work is around that. So any application that comes in that's new or a variation to an existing licence, I will go out most often jointly with the council's licensing team to meet and to visit these new applicants, because I like to know what is it actually that you want to do, because it's quite difficult sometimes to write that down so that you have an understanding. I like to look somebody in the eye and say, explain to me what your business is and how you're going to uphold your licensing objectives. Obviously, I look at the crime and disorder side of things, and quite a lot of the applications that we do get in on occasions can be a little bit poor. So we will work with them, and that's what it is. It's about working with these businesses, because we're not here to say no, we're here to work with them and make sure that the product that they have and the licence that they're then granted is safe, that they can then make sure that the public is safe and they can uphold all of their objectives that we expect from them. So we work with applicants, their agents, often sometimes their solicitors that they appoint as well, so that we can prevent it going to those hearings, which are obviously costly and timely for all organisations. And if that does fail, then sadly that's when we would object and ask for a hearing to be called. But most often than not, that's probably why there's a reduction, is because of the work that's going on behind scenes.
One of the things that is a real test of monitoring whether we as a licensing authority, and I include all of us us in that, so even if you get to committee, is how few appeals we have to magistrates. And if we even go there, how few we lose. Because we tend to make sure our policy is robust, it's fairly administered, and that everybody is on the same page when it comes to promoting the licensing objectives. Everybody always looks from the outside as if it's a breach of the license. That's not what we're about. It's about making a situation better through the objectives. So when you look through, and if you look through this year, last year, you'll see how many appeals there have been and just how many we have won. Because when we have to take a stance, the committee is always brave to do so, and we will always employ quality barristers, usually one of the top 5 in the country for anything we do, because we want to make sure that provides a good critical friend as to whether we've taken a reasonable stance from the outset, and if we have taken a reasonable stance, then we can defend that position.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, so it's just a quick one going forward for this coming year about the disposal of vapes and things like that. Will that be something for this licensing or for the police, and how? Yeah, as you're both here, thanks.
I'll answer that for you. So they're not here, but I do work a lot with trading standards, and they have recently set up a designated team just to deal with vapes. So vapes do sit with trading standards, but they are supported by the police and local authority in joint operations when we visit premises, certainly if they're licensed. But obviously the evidence, if they were to call any sort of review, would come from them. But they do have a designated team, which is working quite well. And there's been lots and lots of visits, lots and lots of education and things of that nature as well. So hopefully that answers for you.
Thank you. Any, Councillor Howes.
Just to come back on that, can I just ask about vapes? Can we monitor what's going on in Australia? Because in Australia, starting, I think it was tomorrow, vapes will only be available from pharmacists. And then after that, you will actually need to talk to your pharmacist and justify it. And no vapes at all will be available to under 18s unless they have prescriptions. I know we're a long way behind with vapes, and I know living in Herne Bay, it's a real problem. And I know it's worse across the whole district, especially where there's schools. So I just think it's something which is a time bomb, and it's going to get much, much worse because we don't know the health implications. So I just think we need to learn from what's going on abroad. Thank you.
I think, as I said, trading standards have these designated officers now, and it does sit with them in respect of that as well. However, from a police perspective, we have child centre policing teams now, and they go into schools and again work in partnership to educate and to obviously deal with vape-related issues as and when the police come across it. But I believe there is some legislation at some point. I know we've just had a change in government, so I don't know where that sits or when that's going to come through. But hopefully there may be some changes at some point this year, maybe into next.
Okay, are there any further questions at all? Okay, in that case, I'm going to ask a question of my own. As most people know, the council has a number of set policies around all sorts of areas of licensing, and some of those policies are subject to review. So I'm going to ask Anton if he can actually just inform the meeting which policies are subject for review this year.
We have a number this year. They usually run 3 to 5 years policies, depending on which one it is. In the past, I've tried to stagger them, but they've all caught up with one another during COVID. This year, we have to, by statute, review the gambling policy and have that adopted and in place by the 31st of January 2025. It seems a long way off, but the gambling policy always takes an age to go through. And it's usually targeted for November and December for full council to look at that. The other two that we have going through at the moment are sexual entertainment venues. So that's cinemas, shops and lap dancing venues. We do not have any in the Canterbury area at the moment. The policy allows for one. There's a wish that there should be no more than one, but it's an indication only. And the proposal will be that policy is readopted without any amendments other than dates, etc. We have the Scrap Metal Dealers Act policy that's coming up for review, and that is going. Both of those are going through together at the same time. They always traditionally start at the same and finish at the same time. So I would imagine they will be in place. I think they go through ONS and Cabinet by August, September time. And then at the end of the year, we will commence the commercial rivercraft renewal. That is the boats and punts operating in the city centre and at Grove Ferry. We set that up to start in November. We have a very good association now with the businesses operating in the city and at Grove Ferry. They will start their review of the policy because they are the experts on the water and we use their knowledge a lot. And hopefully that will be in place by the 1st of April of 2025. The reason we start in November and finish in March is because it's convenient to the operators. They just do not have the time to participate fully during their seasonal months. So it's just common sense. That's why we do that. And then we can breathe a sigh of relief. And then we will be starting the taxi and PHV policy. Those who remember it going through ONS and Cabinet said that we should have a review in 2026 when we will know more about EVs. And the alcohol policy, that's okay for another couple of years. And that's all of our policies. And
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Anton. I have a couple of questions about. So when you're looking at the gambling policy, is that something that your team do, or are councillors involved? Is there working groups? How is it? How does that all come about?
how it works is that, as I say, it's statutory based, so it has to be done once every 3 years. The County of Kent has a steering group, and basically we all have very similar, if not identical, policies, because the Gambling Commission really dictates through the Gambling Act what should be in a policy, and then you adjust for local necessities or quirks or whatever. The process is that the officers, started with myself, will draft a policy, and there are no changes proposed. The process then goes to the senior officers to take it to management team for authority for publication that there is a notice, but simultaneously MT and the senior officers responsible will consult with councillors all the way through. Primarily, as it's licensing, they will go to your chairman first, and then if there were major changes, then perhaps the whole committee would like a meeting to discuss that. The couple of flies in the ointment this year is obviously due to the recent election. The proposed review of gambling by the Gambling Commission has stalled, but there is a history of them still bringing the legislation through, or their national guidance, which we need to follow. It's usually issued during the course of the renewal process. So we may have to review that policy as we get nearer the time. Canterbury District is such that it's following the national trend, is that gambling premises are reducing. The main reason for that is obviously online betting. It's much easier. We have seen a significant reduction in the number of betting shops recently, and that's due to fixed odds betting terminals. They used to have a slip rule, which betting shops could have 2 of the FOBT machines, as they're called, and they were quite lucrative, probably enough to run a betting shop without a single person coming through the door. But since the rates of betting and the prizes have reduced, it doesn't make them so financially viable. So that's why you'll see a continual reduction, until probably they become a thing of the past.
Okay, thank you very much, Anton, for that. I thought it was important that the whole committee should be aware of that kind of process, and they'll be asking me questions and keeping me on my toes, I've got no doubt. Are there any final questions at all that have occurred? Okay, in that case, we are going to move on to the next item, which is any other urgent business, and there's been none notified. That's correct, isn't it? I think?
None notified, Chair.
Okay. And the final item is urgent business to include exclusion of the press. There's none notified, so there's no need to exclude press or public. And at this point, I want to basically close the meeting by thanking everybody for attending and showing interest and asking pertinent questions of our licensing officers and our other responsible authorities, namely fire service and police here. And so I would like to thank the officers, Anton and Bryony, and Karen Longley and PC Roth for answering those questions. And we look forward to a fruitful year ahead of licensing matters. Okay. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting and thank everybody for attending. Thank you.